Hell is where God says, have it your way. If someone will not have God, then they bring their own hell with them.
If Christ is Lord, then he rules over how I watch TV, how I treat my children, how I treat my neighbors. He rules over everything.
Oh, you're breaking his heart. No, he's gonna break you.
What's wrong with you people? I mean, this is what's wrong with the Christian church today. We don't know who God is.
Give us some men who know the truth.
Put on the full armor of God and pray, 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 and pray.
Officer, you are not engaging in exhibiting constitutional behavior. You don't know the law, and yet you pretend to represent it.
Five Solas Studios presents Reformed Radio.
All right. Welcome back to Reformed Radio, everyone. I know it's been a while, but we made it. We finally got back. We're in a new studio, trying things out here, so we hope you enjoy it as much as we are. We're just going to continue going on with our culture series, and this time we're going to talk about the culture of effeminacy. We have a special guest on today, and this is Pastor Chris. Say hello, Pastor Chris.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm well.
You have a great shirt on.
Thanks.
It's very white.
Very white.
Well, we had to go out and find the manliest man that we could possibly find since we're doing a show on manliness, right?
And what color shirt does he pick? White.
Hey, I'm Caucasian. Okay?
You can't go, white is my favorite color, and it has nothing to do with race. I love white. White cars, white everything. It's just
So it's hot outside. This one breathes, and I didn't want to be sweating.
That's a great. You see, being a man, you're thinking, you're wise. It wasn't just a wardrobe pick.
No, we excel at aesthetics anyway. So we got the black, blanketing, the white shirt in the middle.
It's an Oreo.
Everything's-
Oh.
It's an Oreo
Oreo.
pen. Right here.
There you go. We got the right man for the show today.
Indeed.
So, Pastor Chris, let's start with this. What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Yes.
Okay, great.
You
See
put-
that?
you
That
put
is how you be a man. You choose everything in one statement.
Put it in front of me, and I will eat it.
That's great. So, how long have you been pastoring?
Ordained in 2019. Bev and I, though, have been serving in all kinds of different capacities for probably 30 plus years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, small groups and whatever, men's groups, women's groups, homeschool groups. Always service has always been a part of our family culture.
That's nice. So this episode, we're talking about how the culture has really redefined what a man is. And I've heard your spiel before. I've heard you preach about this before, and I know it's great. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have you talk about this. And later we hope to have your wife on and really seal the deal with all of your family experience being talked about. So we're going to talk about what it is to be a man in this culture. And so with that, let's kind of just jump into it. And what do you think is the definition of effeminacy? How would you define that, given your background and what Scripture has to say?
I think we have to look at this from a slightly different twist. That is masculinity. Culture would put a lot of exteriors. That's the wrong word. They would define something as masculine if it appeared on the outside as masculine. Big buff guy, perfect beard, muscles, maybe some tats. That's a masculine guy. But that's all exterior. Scripture defines masculinity and paints a picture through character issues. When we look at Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit, you can interpret those, and when you do so, you get to the end of it, which is self-control. And I think that is probably one of the marks that defines masculinity the best in my mind. As I look around and I see that, it is self-control. The alpha dog in a dog pack is the one with the most self-control. He's the least influenced by all the impulses that are going on around him.
Okay.
And he sets the tone then for the rest of the pack.
Yeah. Follow me, get in line, or I'm going to show you my teeth.
I'm going to bite you. Yeah.
Right.
So to define effeminate, we
it's
talked
a hard
about
word, isn't it?
we knew we were going to get to this place.
Going to be some struggle here.
That word, I think, is exactly the opposite of that. There are also externals to that.
Mm-hmm.
Female-like characteristics and manners. And not to get off in the weeds too far, I have also known very, very strong men raised by women exclusively who had a lot of external, kind of effeminate sort of mannerisms, but who were rock solid, immovable pillars of strength. They just never had been taught how to be a man. Mm. So we're male by birth, we become men by choice. Okay. You've heard me say, you take a 10-year-old boy, you put him in a motorcycle gang, what's he likely to be when he grows up?
Some kind of guy on a Harley being a jerk and
slashing
tires.
Take that same 10-year-old boy, surround him with doctors, lawyers, let him play golf at the country club. What's he likely to be when he grows up? So it's that influence.
That prep that gets beat up.
Yeah.
And then he'll sue you.
Yeah, that guy. But it's that kind of influence. A boy becomes a man because he's been invited to participate in the life of another man. So he learns how to respond. He learns how to act. All of that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's good.
I don't know if I've answered the question or not.
I think you have. I guess kind of to go along with that is when we talk about those mannerisms, you were mentioning that somebody that may have been raised by a mother exclusively is lacking some of these masculine qualities. What are some of those qualities that are you talking about there that are missing? What's something that's missing from that? And is that important? I know you said these guys are rock solid. So does it really matter all that much on the outside if that's how they look, or?
Well, unfortunately, we are judged by that, and in a boy's life, he gets to a place, if things are happening properly for him, where when a male child is born, he's taking from his mother. He's taking from a woman, even nourishment from her body, right? She provides for him. She cares for him. She does all of this for him. At some point along a boy's life, he's supposed to turn and begin to give back to the woman, to protect, to provide for her. That comes from having been invited to be like a man by other men. And you see too often women who have married big, hairy boys.
Yeah.
And I see it so often. We have counseled so many families, and almost without exception, it's like the woman is raising one more male child. That was supposed to be her husband. It was supposed to be her provider, her protector,
Right.
And it always seems to be okay for a while, but it leads to resentment.
Right. So that kind of goes back to what you're saying as a man who's effeminate is a man without self-control.
Yes. Well, without self-control, we default to selfishness.
Yeah.
We're self-serving. We put our own interests ahead of of others, like our wife or our children. And I think effeminacy shows up in the choices we make, again, born out of selfishness or being a self-serving kind of person. We don't put one another's interests ahead of our own. We indulge our flesh in the moment as opposed to long-term thinking. We make our decisions based on circumstances instead of principles. Mm-hmm. That's not strength to do that. Strength is to sacrifice. Strength is to make decisions, like I said, based on principles, not on circumstance. Circumstances change. Principles don't.
Yeah, that's true. So that was a fantastic answer. That was great. So why should we be listening to you? What qualifies you to be talking to us about men? I mean, you already proved that you can. So what's your background? How many children do you have?
I have 7, 6 men and 1 lady. And I say that I have 6 boys, 1 daughter, coming up on 11 grandchildren. And it's interesting because this has always been an important topic to me. I never referred to the boys as boys. Never said, "Hey, come on, boys, let's get going. Hey, come on, boys, we got to go do the yard. Come on, boys, we got to clean up." I always said, "All right, man, let's go. Men, time to do the yard. Men, we got to get in the car. We're going to church. Men, let's do this. Men, let's do that." Seems silly, but I was not in the business of raising boys. I was in the business of raising men. The goal being to create men who would go out, marry, influence their families for God's kingdom, influence in their sphere of influence and those around them, their church, their workplace, their lives.
Right.
Men are leaders, and leadership is influence.
Kind of going along with self-control you mentioned, and I've said this multiple times on the show, so sorry everybody, but I think that one of the things that kind of goes along with that is men are supposed to be responsible for their actions and responsible for their families. And it's kind of that shrugging off of responsibility, which is part of, I think, the feminine culture, saying, I don't want to deal with that. I just want to, have my pie and eat it too. Like, I just don't care.
Everything's too hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm constantly working on that with my son. He's like, "No, I don't want to do it. It's too hard," or "I can't," or whatever. And it's like, because it's hard, we need to do it.
Yeah.
Right? We have to overcome this. And I talk to him like, we have to be responsible. I'm responsible for my children and their actions and for my wife. So if they start acting up and doing something dumb, well, that's my fault ultimately. And I'm going to be the one standing before God to hold that accountable. I'll be the ones with that weight on my shoulder. And ultimately Jesus has redeemed us, but still, like, I can't shrug that. And that's part of being a man. And I think that ties into being masculine. Masculine is not just, the brawny man because he's big and strong, or the guy with, tattoos and he's real cool and, kind of clever or whatever. So going with that, you kind of already defined this pretty well, but maybe you can give us a great picture. What is a great picture of a masculine man? Pure masculinity.
Pure masculinity.
Is he domineering?
No. He is a man who sets aside his own interests for those of his wife and children. A masculine man is one who protects, provides, nurtures, cherishes, adores, and loves his wife and family. A masculine man is a man who would not only take a bullet for his wife, but would love her enough to cross her. And so when I talk to men all the time, I don't doubt for a minute that they would take a bullet for their wives. I do look around our culture and wonder how many men are willing to actually cross their wives. We've had situations in our life, and my bride of 42 years is the most well-read. We had like 3,000 books in our house. Most of them she's read. You're talking to a dyslexic, so, how'd that happen?
So you got maybe, 30?
Yeah. And a coloring book to me.
Can you stay in the lines?
Yeah, it's been a good day. And so she is so well-read across all kinds of topics. There have been situations in our life where we were at a crossroads, and Bev had very strong opinions about, what was the right course, what was the right path, the right thing to do. Of course, a loving husband will listen to his wife's counsel. But he has to make his own decisions based on what, is right in his mind for the family. It's real easy just to say, okay, honey, yeah, whatever, because that way, there's no ruffled feathers. But that's not strength. And that's not real love. I mean, does Christ treat his church by rolling over and giving her everything she's ever wanted, responding to every whim? Of course not. And so, as a husband, we have to operate in that place of strength. What's the best thing for my bride and my family? It may not be, whatever the issue is du jour on the table. It may be that we're going to have to postpone that and do something else. And, like I said, we've had those issues. You will meet Beverly, and she's a strong woman with strong opinions. And she has the strength to be a submissive wife. Culture would define that as being a doormat, but I'm telling you, it is the epitome of strength. And we, settled it, and off we went. And often, not every time, but often, it will take some months, years maybe, and she says, "You know what? You were right. That was the right call."
Yeah, I have a similar situation. My wife is very strong-willed.
I've met her.
And she's brilliant. She's very smart.
Yep.
And when we first got married, it was a big challenge for her to submit and to me to lead right. It was because I'm also strong-willed, and so we're just sitting there butting heads trying to figure this out. And she's usually right, and I was wrong most of the time, and I wasn't approaching it the way I should have. And so it took a couple years, but we finally started to figure it out. But yeah, that's a hard thing to do, and it's kind of daunting, I think, for a man, a good godly man wanting to lead his wife and wanting to do that, but not really feeling confident in doing it. And I think a lot of that came down to just being afraid to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes. Right. It's not the end of the world. My bride is still with me on this path. So even if I screw up, it's not like she's sitting there going, "I told you so." We're going to figure this out and try something different. It's whatever the case is. And I think you have to be full of courage as a masculine man to try, right? Yes. Do you think that's a fair statement?
I think it's a very fair and accurate statement. At a baser level, I don't know if this is appropriate to talk about. You can cut it if not. But often, especially in younger marriages, a man won't cross his wife because if she's mad, then there won't be sex.
Oh, yeah.
So I have seen that as a driver in decision making, and that's not a strong guy to begin with.
Right.
That's I would am I way off in the weeds here? I would say that's more boyish behavior to begin with. But that old expression of "Mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy."
Happy life, happy wife.
Yeah, that and yes,
real close.
Yes,
well, I don't say it very.
And certainly that there's a place,
out of practice,
a place for that, but that's not the driver,
right?
And often in culture today, it is the driver, and that's a shame.
Yeah, well, we've already established why that's the case, and that's because most of the men of our culture are not being men; they're being boys, right? And so they're not standing up to their wives, not leading them rightly, and so it's all about what's in it for them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, with that in mind, that makes perfect sense as why that would be so common, I think.
And again, that's a very short sighted, temporary kind of. It's not self-sacrificing; it's very self-serving.
Well, it has the opposite effect, too. I think you
it does.
Should double down on that statement. If you want a bad sex life, don't be masculine. Don't cross your wife. They'll start to resent you, and that...
There is nothing attractive about it.
I think that's a good way to say
it. A hairy boy.
There's nothing attractive to a woman about a big, hairy boy who's supposed to be her husband.
So you've been, I think, hinting at this a lot, and you talked a lot about it in your sermon. So I'm ready to bring it up for you. So a lot of what you're describing as these effeminate men are just nice men. They're just nice guys. And you're saying that that's not really what a man is supposed to be. It's not just the guy who's a people pleaser, not willing to get anybody's feathers ruffled. You're saying it's kind of the opposite of that. Not necessarily being nasty, but could you kind of maybe help us understand the difference between a nice guy versus a godly masculine man?
Sure. Let me just say right up front that the church does not need any more nice guys. We are where we are culturally and in the church because men have been tricked by an influx of feminism, and churches led by other nice guys who were browbeat by women into submission. And I have talked to pastors who basically said, "Oh, these women are driving me crazy. They will, it's a big battle just on the color of the carpet, all this stuff." And it's easier just to capitulate and go with them. The church does not need more nice guys. What the church needs are strong men who will lead their lives based on what the Word of God says, and we know for a fact that in the absence of a biblical conviction, we go the way of culture.
I was waiting for it.
There it comes.
It was coming.
It's coming. And we see this. This is what happens with nice guys. This is why we have nice guys, because, help me out here, Mark. We are adrift and being influenced by culture on a daily, men being influenced by culture on a daily basis. The culture does not want us to be strong men. It does not want us to make decisions based on the Word of God. It does not want us to be leading our families. It does not want any of those things. Mm-hmm. Culture would have us roll over.
You're so right, though. There's even, it's almost like somebody's doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Like there's a subversion going on. Like there's this push for effeminacy from somewhere, that's been actively promoted out of certain segments. And see if you agree with this, that there's been kind of a correlation between fewer men in the church because the church doesn't offer them anything manly. It offers them effeminacy, and so you see a lot of young men going, well, why would I even go there?
Yeah. There was a book written years ago called Why Men Hate Going to Church. And this was probably 20 years ago. But it was addressing these very issues. Everything from the colors to the music to the emotions, it was all feminine. Mm-hmm. And over time, I've been there, you've been there. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just doesn't sit well. Mm-hmm. It's like, yuck, this is not for me. And so the men who might lead abandon it.
Because, that's what they think what Christianity is supposed to be, is you're just this nice, submissive guy.
Yeah. And when
you're going to stop and do the dishes, and you're going to, bend over backwards to do everything your wife wants. And that's, the church is going to champion that. I remember hearing sermons like a good, godly husband is going to do all the dishes for, his family. It's like that. There is service as a masculine man. I'm not saying there isn't. I know that's important. But when it's about, I'm just going to serve so that I don't ruffle the feathers, like you said, I'm going to keep using that, then that's not being a real man. That's not being that leader. It's not trying to take care of your wife. That's just submitting to your wife to her detriment.
It is to her detriment. That is exactly right. And, you can have this discussion about, can women lead? Of course they can. Yes, a woman can lead. Is a woman designed, equipped to do that for the long haul? No. It is not in their best interest to do that. Are there women who do? Yeah. Margaret Thatcher, as an example. There are lots of women who are capable of leading. Beverly, we had 2 businesses for a while. I recruited her to run one of our businesses. This was 4 or 5 years ago. The kids were gone. It was eating me, this particular company that we had. It went from 0 to 60 employees in 90 days, and it was all administrative stuff. That's everything about it was administration. She breathes administration with the ease with which I breathe air. So it was a perfect fit. And it was also a detriment in our relationship because of the stress it created. It is very addictive, and Bev will be the first one. You should ask her about that if she comes on. It was a very addictive rush to have that kind of influence and control and to see such tangible results by the things that she was implementing. Took her out of our home for a season there was a lot of work that she was doing both there and in our home, business related. And please don't hear me say women have no place in the workforce. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that in a leadership role for the long period of time, it is not it was not in Bev's best interest to do that. And so we took steps to get out of that business. Mm-hmm. We saw the effects on our relationship. We saw the effects on our home life. We saw the effects primarily in an absence of peace and joy in the home.
Okay, yeah.
And it was contrary to the goals that we had set out for our family and our life back in August of 1992. They've been written and put on the wall since then. And those were always kind of a guiding set of standards by which we were making those decisions. Those were the principles by which we were making decisions. You know, they were based on God's word, and we used those to make decisions, not on the circumstances of the moment, but on the principles. So the circumstances of the moment in this business was really doing well. I mean, we were making a lot of money, but the price was too high.
Yeah, sacrificing your marriage and really her livelihood, or her well-being probably would be more accurate.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to, I was talking to my wife about this earlier today, is, you know, when Adam and Eve sinned, the roles kind of got swapped. Like there was kind of this yearning for a different way of doing it. So like the woman who wasn't designed to be the leader, that's not really what she's designed to do, was overcompensating and taking that on. That was kind of in her sin nature to do that. While the man was easier to just be lazy, shrug it off and say, I don't want to do it. Here, you want to do it, you can do it. And that, I think that's kind of been the case really since then. You know, that sometimes it's different. You have the real domineering men who are just all about control, but they're obviously doing it wrong. And women are being submissive. But I feel like there's kind of that, in our culture, you can kind of see that swap. And so do you agree with that? Do you think that's
I think there's a very, very obvious swap that has gone on. And when we define headship and leadership and masculinity and so on, we have to always be careful that we're not associating those traits with personality styles, because they're different. Mm-hmm. You know, when we talk about headship and leadership of the men, you know, society would say, oh, you're one of those hairy knuckle draggers. You know, that's not what we're talking about at all. We're talking about a position of strength that lives that strength out in sacrifice, in service, in protection, in provision, in care, in love, in adoration. I think it's Doug Wilson who said years and years ago in a book that when a man loves a woman properly, he provides for her rich soil in which she can grow and thrive. And the more she grows and thrives and blooms and blossoms, the more she pleases him, the more she pleases her husband, the more he loves, adores, cherishes her, and provides even more of that rich soil that she can grow in. And so it's that kind of cycle over time. The Proverbs 31 woman is the end result of a long life of that kind of husband-wife relationship.
Of the godly, masculine man.
Yeah. And it says in Proverbs 30 that he trusted her because she had proven herself, you know, over a long time like that. So yes, there's a definite swapping of roles out there. And I see it, I hate to sound like a curmudgeon, but I drive around my neighborhood and I see young men glued to their phones, walking their dog, and I don't get these flannel pajama things guys walk around in now.
Oh boy!
Oh, okay.
You know,
I haven't been seeing a lot of that.
Saw it yesterday. I know.
But it's a manifestation in culture of what we were talking about. It's so hard. You know, I look at this and I think, wow, dude, you couldn't even put a pair of pants on. I mean, I'm sure they are pants, but they look like jammies. And I'm thinking, you know, but it's this, it exudes weakness and comfort and ease above all.
Yeah.
You know, Pajama Boy. It's the famous meme. I don't know if y'all seen that.
Yeah. Anyway, so I just...
But
that's
anyway,
moving on.
Shut up, man. Yeah.
No, How did we get here? Anyway, but it is that cultural manifestation of weak men. There it is, right there.
Yeah. So, is there hope for a Christian man who's been the nice guy, or he's kind of the effeminate guy, because that's what he thought Christianity was supposed to be? He's been going to the churches, and he's like, there's nowhere for me to be, but I feel like I have to be here. What can you tell men like that who want to be a godly man, but they haven't heard any better? What would you tell them?
I would tell them, yes, there's absolutely hope. His name is Jesus Christ, and his Holy Spirit is active and at work in a man who is humble enough to repent and want to be like he's supposed to be. To that end, he needs to find someone who he can emulate, older men typically, and it goes back to this. We try to make it all so complicated, but if you see someone who has what you want, go do what they do to get what they have, right? I mean, you can't continue to do the same thing over and over and expect different results. So for that guy who's come to a place in life, probably through stress in his marriage, and says, you know what? I have not been that man I should be. Yes, there is absolutely hope. That is the goal. I don't want to put words in God's mouth, but that is the goal of man, is to be the head, to represent Christ in the marriage, right? Mm-hmm. As Christ loved his bride, so the husband loves his wife. Yep. That is the goal. So yes, there's absolutely hope.
Oh, that's good to hear. So I wanted to bring up 1 Kings 2 just a little bit here, because I really feel like this kind of describes what it is to be a man. And it's really straightforward. It says, be strong, be a man. There you go. I mean, be strong and be a man. I loved what you said when you're talking about it in your sermon. It's like there's not a description there of what a man is. It's already assumed. We know what being a man is. But he does kind of take a little bit more time to explain that afterwards. You shall keep the responsibility given to you by God by keeping his commandments. That's the first step of being a man, is following God and keeping his commandments. It's your responsibility. Take responsibility. That's what being a man is all about. Okay, so that was great. That was really fantastic. Do you have anything to add to that, Pastor Mark?
You kind of caught me off guard there. I was thinking about 1 Kings chapter 2.
You were thinking about that meme again. That's what you were doing.
I try to put that meme as far away from my mind as I can.
Isn't that a crazy thing? Is it just me, or is that just a crazy thing?
What's that?
The pajamas?
The pajama thing, man. I don't get it.
No, it is not just you. It is, like you said, an outward manifestation of an inward reality that is. I witnessed it in person. It's funny you should have brought that up. I witnessed it in person Friday, I believe, or Saturday morning. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Okay, so can you imagine a young woman in search of a prospect as a husband saying, you know what? That guy that runs around in his jammies all day, that's the guy for me.
He's got the life.
I was looking for the teddy bear. It's just,
they're missing the knight in shining armor there. Just the lazy slob on the couch kind of guy.
Yeah, and I don't want to. I hope this isn't coming off as harsh and critical. It's not my intent at all. It is just an observation of where we are in our culture and our society that is contrary to everything that God has in his word for us. Mm-hmm. Right there, be strong, be a man. God told Joshua, be bold and very courageous. Mm-hmm. Don't deviate to the left, to the right. Do exactly what I'm telling you to do, the way I've told you to do it. And why? Because it's going to be tough out there, and you're going to need to stick with me. And that is not the message culture gives us today.
No, it's about being in pajamas and just doing whatever you want.
Yeah.
And
it's either that on one side, so it falls away on both sides of the ditch. So the path is narrow and there's a right way, but there's ditches on both sides. And let's make sure we reiterate it. You've already said it well, but let's reiterate it. On the one side is the kind of the pajama boy part, but on the other side is the out of control, following no rules, very destructive male behavior. See?
And to that end, I've said this before, patriarchy gets a bad rap in today's culture.
Mm-hmm.
And when I hear men telling me that they are the patriarch in their home, I think, ooh, that to me, that's a red flag. If we talked about this somewhere, the thing hanging off the back of a trailer hitch, we'll cut that out.
We got a lot of that here in Texas for y'all northern folks.
We are also overrun by men that beat their wives or abusive and so this falling apart of manhood doesn't help women in the long or short run on both sides of the path.
Yeah, that's definitely not the picture of masculinity.
No, it is
not.
Because
you've talked about
that's
it.
That's cruelty. That's not masculinity. That's cruelty.
It's just being a big bully.
Yeah.
I have power and I want to influence others to do what I want in an aggressive, inappropriate manner. That's only self-serving. It's still just like you described. It's still just being a little boy, that hairy boy. It's not somebody who has control over their emotions, doesn't have control over their actions. It's just all about me. It's kind of like they're just emoting. Right, I think typically, I don't know about you, y'all have done counseling and stuff, but every time I see somebody who tends to be more towards the guy who's going to be a wife beater, he doesn't have control over himself.
No, not at all.
Quickly and easily triggered and very angry, very violent, and that's not what we've said. We said somebody who controls themselves, who has one of the fruits of the Spirit, self-control, right? And I think that's a good marker there. That kind of helps us clear from going that direction.
Well, and as parents, parents of either boy or girl, with regard to child training, we train children because training produces maturity. Maturity produces self-control. And in an absence of order in the home, not totalitarian kind of rule, not dictatorial kind of stuff, but in an absence of order in the home, typically there's a higher level of chaos, and the kids operate with a pronounced level, a lack of self-control. And it doesn't mean a 3-year-old's going to behave like an 18-year-old, or that's not what we're talking about. But over time, they are able to mature into that kind of self-controlled behavior.
Mm-hmm. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, is if that child is acting like he's 3 when he's 18, that's on the father. Where is the dad? Where was the man who should have been there to model self-control and modeling being responsible and being that leader?
And that's the role of headship. And the father, I don't remember who said this, but when you read enough, you no longer have any original thoughts. But
you're only on 30 books, so you got more to go.
Can I go home now?
There's the door. Go ahead.
What were we talking about? I don't even remember anymore.
Well, and let me throw this out there. Let's also mention that sometimes young boys don't have a father.
Yeah.
Let's say their father dies in the war or whatever, and it's a horrible situation. And here's a young woman trying to cope with this larger situation.
Yeah, that's good.
And this has, so we should have a lot of compassion there. And where women get failed again is in those kind of situations. The broader society is not there to support her because the broader society has collapsed into effeminate action, and that is not there as support for her. See, where it In the past, it was.
Yeah, that's great that you brought that up because that's a big deal.
Well,
That's
it is,
something people run into.
and thank you for that reminder because, when I was talking about can women lead, yes, they certainly can, AKA every single mother out there is an example of that. Women are the consummate survivalists. Men go off, get goofy, and marry their secretary and run off. Women will take the kids and press on to their detriment. They can do it. Is it in their best interest to do it for the rest of their lives? No. Somebody's got to.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's going against the model, right?
It is going against.
The man is the head, and he should be there, but when he's not, that's what a woman has to step up until God provides another man or some other option.
Church full of men that were there to support.
Yeah.
And now that's not always the case.
Yeah, part of our whole vision for our family was throughout my life, I have worked hard to create relationships with men who would love me enough to tell me the truth, even if it hurt, but would also be there if anything happened to me, that they would be invested enough in my family to step in and assist my wife and direct my sons and my daughter, and just be there in exactly the kind of thing Mark's talking about. Yeah. That is lacking today. It's a very rare thing.
It's true. I mean, you basically, in those situations where it's just the mother, you kind of have the nice guys who aren't really involved, or you might have, the rap music kind of guy. That's your model, the man, and that's like going one extreme into like this really hard gang life where you're just nothing, or it's this extreme of effeminacy, and both lead you to destruction. That's not what you need. And so, what? Since you brought that up, Pastor Mark, what do you think the solution is for Christian men? How can we help a mother who's in that situation?
Well,
what can we do?
We have to start broad-based, since this is a larger aspect of our society, unfortunately, now that we're strapped with. We have to start building again. So that's the first step. We have to build to where this, you can call it infrastructure if you like or whatever, but society-wide, this is the way things used to be. And we need to be emphasizing this in the church and our men's groups and the things we're doing right here. We're doing those things right now. We need to offer young men an alternative to the world, where the church is not effeminate and such, because the Bible is certainly not.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. Maybe we talked about it at the last men's group or something. Why is Islam growing so fast? Because it requires something of men. It expects them to be like something. It's not at all feminine. And that resonates in the heart of a man. You see it in, if you've ever been to a marine park with the orcas, the big male orcas in the wild, their dorsal fin, is like 6 feet tall, stands, and they go off through the water. In captivity, the male orca, his dorsal fin is hunched over. He's, that's not what he was created to be.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a little bit difficult for weak men to really stick around in our church. I think it's very, very difficult for them because we don't really have that or offer it, and we kind of require biblical behavior. And a lot of that, let me speak on behalf of the women, because I like this that Doug Wilson says about Moscow. He says, our women are educated, and they're smart, and they know the Bible, and they demand that it be followed. See, and that's how the women in our church are. Yes, they will not stand for anything less. They will not accept anything less than that.
And that puts pressure on the husband to do his duty.
Pressure. It's refining pressure.
Yeah, it is a very humbling thing to have your wife come to you and say, I have a question, and not be able to answer it right away.
Yeah.
out of the Word. You know,
I always feel like it's a letdown when that happens. Like, oh, I should have known that.
Well, but it's that refining pressure. Okay, I got to get in the Word and answer this and answer it properly. You know, the flesh would say one thing, but the man of God will say something else.
Okay, so you brought that up. What kind of encouragement or advice can you give to men who maybe are not able to answer those questions yet? Let's say their wives are super smart. They know the Bible better than them. Maybe they're new to this, or they're just starting to understand that they've been maybe the nice guy. They wanted to be a masculine man. How can they deal with that refining pressure in a way that builds them up and not discourages them?
That's a good question.
They can start simply just by knowing that's what their wife desires.
Yeah, that's good.
And that they will invest the time to get there, right? But that's what their wife. I always tell y'all what Dodie tells me: be a man. And that's what they want. And so they have a willing ally in the process. Even when there's going to be a little testing and pushback and things, like Chris said, where they need to be crossed at times, right? But you have a kind of a willing ally in almost all cases, because that's what they desire.
Yeah, that's good.
And to that point, if the wife has been in charge, again, they are the survivalists. They will carry the ball when no one else will. When that man decides, you know what, I failed in my role, honey, I want to do better, I want to be the man, he should prepare himself for some pushback.
Yeah.
Because she has no reason to trust him. So to your question, he's going to start small and one little victory at a time, but he's got to demonstrate that he is trustworthy, that he is serious, that the ship has turned, and it is going to be a new day.
Yeah. Good. And he's going to have to remember he's got all the eyes of the family on him.
Yep.
You know, and that goes back to responsibility. If you're not reading your Bible, do you really need to expect your kids to do that?
Yeah.
Do you expect your wife to be doing that?
Well, and your kids are going to look, they catch more, what is that expression? They catch more than they...
It's caught more than taught.
That. And so, it's one thing to preach at the kids, blah, 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 blah. But kids and wives have a way of sniffing out hypocrisy a mile away.
Yeah.
That's how husbands and fathers exasperate their children.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. Well, I think that was all fantastic. I think that was a lot of great material. And I really appreciate you coming on and just giving us so much great wisdom through that.
This was fun.
So I'm really looking forward to you coming back with your wife. I think that'll be great to hear a little bit more of her side of all this.
I brought in a guest speaker to one of our men's groups, because it's one thing for a man to say this, and a lot of men who aren't living this out will say, yeah, right, whatever. When you have a woman step in and say, I want my husband to be a man, and initiate and take charge and make decisions, you see the other guys go, okay.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on, Chris.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
This is great.
Thanks for always being here, Mark. And with that, we'll see y'all later. So God bless. Have a great one.